hopefully significantly shorter time scale, when do you think the world will open back up again post-pandemic?
I see. Um, I don't know. I mean, vaccines are already here. I mean, the number of cases in the US is going down finally. In the rest of the world, like in India, for example, is the other place that I've been tracking. It's significantly low. Um, I don't know. I feel like I think things will be qualitatively different maybe in 6 months. I do think it will be a slow process, right? So it'll be hard to say that now the world is open versus it wasn't open a week ago. So it's hard to draw a discrete thing. But yeah, I think in 6 months things will be qualitatively different. And so today is Feb 10th. And yeah.
All right. We have a concrete prediction. We can check against reality and hold up the tenets of falsifiability.
Yeah.
And on a significantly shorter time horizon, hopefully, when do you think the world will open back up? What are your projections?
Geez, I mean, COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been delaying this, but I'm still thinking now fall. I'm hoping to be back in the classroom. I don't think we're going to have summer conferences. I think that's clear. So I don't think that most of them have officially gone virtual, but that's just a matter of time. And so I'm still hoping that by September we'll all be vaccinated. We'll have herd immunity, and we can all go back into the classroom. I want to be back in the classroom teaching my class next fall. I think that's reasonable. I don't know if it's definite at this point, but I think it's still a reasonable assumption. But then I think it's interesting to think about how the world's going to change. I recently read Fareed Zakaria's book, Post-Pandemic World, right? Which I like Fareed a lot, but it's not my favorite of his books. But how are we going to do conferences in hybrid mode? I mean, I think we want to go back to physical conferences, but we also want to allow the broader participation that just having everything online has allowed for a lot of people. And so I look forward to saying, what can we learn from this whole dreadful experience to make? That's why I actually like the Biden motto, build back better. It has nice alliteration. But I think we can all think about that is we don't want to just go back to the way things were pre-COVID. We want to say, what have we learned over the last year to make it a better world, right? Maybe we need to change conference. Maybe we don't all go into the office, 5 days a week. Maybe we only go to in 3 days and, we work from home. And how can we find something that's in between this horrible life we've had the last year, but maybe some things that are good about it, and incorporate those into a post-pandemic world that maybe we've learned something from this experience that can actually make things better afterwards.
When do you think the world will open back up post-COVID?
I don't know. I don't have any particular insight beyond what the news says, and it seems like it's very dependent on where you are in the world. So I don't know. I don't think I have anything to add.
But in the spirit of making verifiable predictions, if you had to estimate, so for example, a game we've been playing at work is, when do you think the first non-voluntary or non-essential person in your team will go back full-time at your office?
Sometime in the fall, I would guess.
It's somewhat verifiable.
Yeah. You want like a specific day?
It's fine. And on a closer time horizon, when do you think the world will open back up post-COVID?
My guess, so my hope, I guess the hope, closer to hope than guess, is that sometime early next year, I guess. Yeah. That's my suspicion, which I think is fine. And then my guess is that it's going to be more or less like we'll have to live together with it, just like flu, except that it's going to be a bit more serious. But my hope stems from the fact that a lot of, let's say, the technologies that have been used to create these vaccines and so on were the results of the science from 70s, 80s, and early 90s. What that means is that we still have a lot of, let's say, our kind of, let's say, weapons against COVID-19 and other pandemic or the infectious disease that all these amazing scientists, biologists, chemists, and so on have been and continue to work on. And then I think I'm very hopeful when I think about how we're going to overcome this ongoing pandemic, thanks to the science, and how we're going to tackle the upcoming future pandemics as well as the other crises that we're going to run into. When I think about the science that is being done, well, of course, when I think about how the political systems or the social systems have coped with all these ongoing pandemic as well as other crises, my hope kind of disappears quite rapidly. But I think the science has been doing well, and I have a pretty good trust in it. So next year.
What is your prediction? When do you think the world will open back up post-COVID?
Hopefully by July, at least. Here it should be fine. And but it's very hard. It's very hard to predict. I was last year around March, we received an email that the company will be shut down and everybody will work from home. And we were worried about, my colleague was worried about some robotics experiments. And I told him, no man, don't worry, we will be back in like 2-3 weeks. And now we are in like 1 year, more than a year after that, and we cannot do that robotics experiment. So that's it's very hard to predict, but now the vaccine is out and so on. It probably by July everything goes back to normal. There are still countries that the vaccination is very, very slow, but hopefully like all countries catch up and the problem will be solved and everything will go back to normal.
And on a closer time horizon, concrete predictions, when do you think the world will open back up again after COVID?
I'm really hoping this summer we can start to go back a little bit, and then the fall will be starting to get close to normal. I think there's also a challenge in terms of different regions of the world have access to different amounts of vaccine supply, and also different populations have their own beliefs about whether or not they would like to participate in vaccinations. So some of that may change the timelines, and hopefully there's no crazy mutations that derails it as well. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very hopeful. I've had one shot so far, so I'm.
Oh, great.
I'm very, very, very hopeful.
Yeah. And how confident would you say you're about this prediction of like the world returning to quasi or the new normal in fall? Are you like reasonably confident?
I'm gonna say reasonably confident because I need it to be.
Okay. And on a closer time horizon, what's your concrete prediction? When do you think the world will open back up post-COVID?
Oh gosh. A new variant is obviously, to me, the only sort of interesting question here. So Chile is 50% vaccinated or something. Chile's pretty vaccinated now, and they've got a big spike coming in. Remember, raw R, in Britain was like 3 or something, or whatever it was. A 70% effective vaccination takes your raw R to around 1. That's not a good number, right? You want to be around 0.5 or something.
Yeah,
So there's a real
significantly less than 1.
Yeah, exactly. Because near 1 is just is too risky. So any new variant, that's bang. So we have to do another vaccine development, another rollout of vaccines, and that's just going to give us another year, pretty much exactly the same if new variant catches off, takes off. We don't know about winter summer really yet. I'm pretty convinced we know about children now. I think children are the same as vaccinated adults, right?
Yeah.
They're essentially, you were back to about, I was talking earlier about human confidence, and maybe so wrong with high confidence, right? Well, I think we had a kind of perfect example, right? We had 2 vaccines in 4 months ago, Oxford, AstraZeneca, and Pfizer. And their RCTs, right, the highest known standard, blah, 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 reported 70% for Oxford, 90% for Pfizer. Okay, so those are the numbers that we're going to use to decide whether this is worth rolling out. And 70% is just about worth rolling out. So, and yeah, it's the only story we have. So let's do it. Seems quite clear now that the correct number is more like 95% for both. Right? Efficacy, so real world efficacy, and now it's 90%, 95% of what do you mean,
Yeah.
But the point is we were told 2 numbers, 70 and 90, and now it looks like whatever the true number is, it's kind of the same for both. So
I had not
one
seen
of those was wrong.
I had not seen a study on AstraZeneca that actually pointed to much higher efficacy. I'll follow up with you afterwards.
Sure, yeah. And I may be wrong, but that's what I'm getting from the sort of now the numbers I'm talking about are reductions in hospitalizations, in the UK, say, or in any of the countries where there are large rollouts. So suddenly our RCT with 30,000, 40,000 people is irrelevant, right? And now what's relevant is the 20 million people not coming into hospital. So we may need to follow up more on that, but I still think there were 2 numbers, 70 and 90, at the end, at the end of last summer. Those numbers seem to be closer than they were then. And my point is just that we were using the best possible techniques then, and yet we kind of fixated on the numbers. And of course, you can go back to those studies and you see, look, there was the dosage problem with AZ, and there was there was a whole bunch of stuff that was kind of means that no one lied, no one did a mistake, no one made a mistake. I don't think we understand, enough people understand the underpinnings of p-values well enough. The Gaussian assumptions that are nearby, maybe not exactly there, but just general. But at this stage, I'm talking about something I'm not really qualified to talk about. So but you did ask me about COVID.
Yeah, if you had to make a prediction about the world opening back up.
Yeah, I would just say, it's like, make a plan. It might change. So, this summer will be good Northern Hemisphere, I assume, just because it was pretty good last summer, and now we have vaccine. But I just think odd things may still happen. So, what do? I still book non-refundable holidays for 6 months, or sorry, refundable holidays for 6 months in the future, and keep rolling that.
What's your prediction for when the world will open back up post-COVID?
I'm hoping soon. I want to see you all, first of all. It's kind of like, now I'm like so sick of just working from home. I would want things to open, and I'm hoping that, with vaccines, maybe end of the year.
December, like you're thinking like November, December, that time frame.
Yeah, like I feel that that will be, maybe we can get back together and wave at each other from like a distance.
Why would we still be waving at a distance? I'm hoping everybody's vaccinated, number of cases are down. Okay.
Me too. Fingers crossed. But no, I'm planning like my summer vacation. So I think about that a lot.
Okay.
So that's the horizon. But I feel that having said that, and also being a woman, I feel that I actually want to think about the future more. It's something that I feel that I should do. With like decision about like family and all that stuff. It's something that I'm not used to thinking. But I feel that, I should. It's something that I need to improve on.
And on a shorter time horizon, When do you think the world will open back up after COVID?
Hey, in California, we're getting vaccines from April 15th for everybody. So hopefully, yeah, later this year, September, hopefully.
Okay, that's a pretty verifiable and falsifiable prediction.
You think it'll be falsified?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, there's certainly a possibility that some of the variants that are rising right now, that we may get stuck in another cycle of vaccination because they evade vaccination.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if they will shut us down again for booster shots on our vaccines or not. I'm hoping not.
Yeah, maybe the FDA approvals are already in place and that you don't need approvals for the second round. So that would be faster.
Yeah, I'm hoping that.
On a shorter time horizon, hopefully. What's your prediction? When do you think the world will open back up post-COVID?
Well, I guess it could be as early as the world. I don't know about the world. I'm actually fairly optimistic about the US at this point, and being able to drive somewhere in August, maybe, kind of carefully. The world, I'm not sure. I have lots of dystopian visions about some parts of the world, including Bulgaria, which is where I'm from, where the vaccination rate is much lower for a number of reasons. Not vaccine supply, but also, as much as we think conspiracy theories are bad in the US, there's countries where they're worse, and I have no idea why that is. So anyways, not to make this political, yeah, I don't know. I think it may be very different for different parts of the world. So
the US.
Hopefully in a year, I'm not sure. Yeah, the US, I mean, I think at least Pitt seems to be planning to reopen in person in the fall. There's music festivals scheduled for the fall. So hopefully by fall, we'll probably still be wearing masks, I suppose. I'm okay with that, but yeah, I guess that's not that far in the future. So I'm kind of happy and optimistic.
On to a shorter time horizon, what's your concrete prediction for when the world will open back up after COVID?
Oh, I hate real predictions where I can prove to be wrong or not. So I guess
falsifiability, man. You're a scientist.
I know. You're absolutely right. So I guess well, I mean, if you look at things, you know, it will depend on what we mean by open up. I think conferences, it's still going to be another roughly year before we see live conferences, and even then, probably going to a bit of a hybrid model. I have strong suspicions that that's not going to work great. I mean, I think that, yeah. So just to get the time set out of the way, so I think a year from now we're going to start going back to something that looks a bit like normal, but I don't think we're going back to normal. I think we've changed. Like, you know, I don't feel like I'm going back to normal in the sense that I think I am going to probably end up working more at home than I did before, and I think a lot of people are going to do that. I think that's so. Whatever we move to, like, I think borders are going to open up. My strong suspicion is that, like, for example, like the border between Canada and the US, maybe later this summer, I think would open up. So tourism travel will probably be, it will depend, right? Like it'll just depend entirely upon is country A and country B sufficiently vaccinated that you have herd immunity, then travel between them will be allowed. So that's, between now and a year from now, I think is kind of when in cascades will be when that happens.
Yeah. There was a point that you were making that I agree with, that hybrid mode is much harder than either fully remote or fully present. And for the same reason, I think a lot of people will want to continue working from home, but I wonder how effective their meetings or their interactions with their colleagues will be if half of their colleagues are in person and the other half are distributed remotely. And
but so it's interesting, right? Because before COVID, many of my meetings were like that. Actually, we would often have somebody remote, and then the rest of us around a table. That wasn't great. Like that was okay, but that wasn't great. And so those meetings are actually kind of going better now that everybody's on their screen. So I'm kind of thinking maybe what I will do is arrange a setup where I take some meetings on Zoom at home when those meetings have somebody virtual anyway, so that we're just all going to be virtual for those meetings. And then when everybody can get around a table, let's go around a table, because I do think that's better. Right? The slight hiccups in transmission are always a little bit annoying. But yeah, so I agree. And when we talk about the conference models that have this hybrid, I totally agree with you. I think it is going to be much harder than either mode, either completely virtual or completely in person. And I have no idea if we're ready for that, right? Like, just think about the bandwidth that would be required, right? Because every poster, say for example, has to live stream out at the same time from a fixed venue. We're not doing that right now. So that, on the other hand, if we manage to make that work, the opportunities that opens up and makes these conferences available to everyone. That's been one of the big advantages of this pandemic, is that like NeurIPS, instead of being hundreds of dollars, is like what, $50,
something like that.
$25, and it's much more affordable, and there's no cost to get there. That's great. I would love it if we could keep that. I think there's work to be done to figure out how that could work. But I don't know. I think there's a commitment to attempt this. We'll see. We'll see if it works, is I think the way. Well, yeah.
What would you say is your concrete prediction for when the world will open back up after COVID? Or you could narrow that down to maybe the US, so that it's at least manageable.
Let's see. I'm engaged, so I'm going to get married. And thanks. So we had to kind of think about this problem very, very intensely. So we're planning sometime around the December timeline. So I'm really hoping that a group of people can get together in December. So that would be the latest I hope the US gets together. I mean, I would love if we could, I don't know, I've heard Biden say July 4th, so that would be really exciting as well. And those are my two predictions, one of which I put a lot of money on.
Yeah, exactly. I guess this is more than hope at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Made, like, concrete
I made a bet. It's pretty funny though. I think that planning a wedding is obviously way harder than planning, say, a giant machine learning conference. But apparently everyone has kind of gotten a little more comfortable with the idea of there being weddings again. And so just everything is like crazy booked at the moment. So it's actually like, it's been an interesting process of like everyone just deciding, hey, maybe we think the future will be better going forward.
Interesting. That's also giving you an insight into what the market believes, right? You're actually getting to know that. Yeah.
Right. Wedding dresses are about 8 months you have to buy in the future. So that's like a great futures market for COVID. Is people actually betting on that?
Yeah. Fascinating. What's your concrete prediction for when the world, or perhaps more narrowly, this country, will open back up again after COVID?
Well, I mean, so I've, predictions are predictions, but I've made a bet. I will be fully vaccinated in a couple of weeks, and I have travel plans in June. Haven't seen my family on the East Coast for quite a while now, and those kids are growing up too fast to not have too much encounter with me or me with them. So I'm going to go. And I assume that most people will have that sort of horizon by sort of summer-ish. I think a lot of people will be back to normal. My university is going to in-person classes in fall, so they've also made a bet along those lines.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing of other universities as well that are going full in person. So sounds like summer is the bet that you're making.
Do you have this metacognitive loop of like imagining your viewers of this series over time and not knowing what we're talking about to some degree?
I'm imagining like the view in my head is someone watching in August or September going, "You fools, like you had no idea what you were talking about."
I mean, AI scientists have a long history of making bad predictions of when things will come, right?
Yeah. But I mean, falsifiability, right? All we get are, the only way to learn is to make a concrete prediction and see if we were wrong.
I'll be out a plane ticket. We'll see.
It is better to be wrong than not even wrong.
Yeah, got to be a participant in your own life, right?
Do you have a concrete prediction on when the world might open back again post-COVID? And I realize that the world is likely too broad, so maybe you could narrow it to whatever local context you'd like to venture a guess about.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where everyone's going to sort of make an error, and it's going to be longer. But we hope everyone's thinking in terms of by the autumn in the UK we can start to be a bit more normal. But the big problem in the world is in countries where it's going to be hard to vaccinate everybody, and that's the real challenge. So I think that's the thing that everyone should worry about. And actually, in particular, countries that have overcome the problem should turn their attention to countries that haven't, to try and contribute to that. And let's see if that happens. That's what should happen. So I would say in certain fortunate countries by September, October, but I don't know if you look at the history of sort of like these pandemic illnesses, polio, things like that, they existed in certain countries 40 years after they were eradicated in others. So I hope it's not like that.
Yeah. If you had to make a prediction about when the world, or perhaps more locally, your part of the world will open back up post-COVID, what would you say? What would you predict?
I mean, in the UK, UK is already sort of opening up, but I think we have to see how things go. There are all these different variants now that are on the horizon. A limited proportion of the population has been vaccinated. There are two sort of parts of this. One is vaccine efficacy and also vaccine coverage. So vaccine efficacy, I mean, it seems to, the evidence seems to suggest that vaccines work even on the variants. Whether that will continue to be the case for newer variants, that has to be seen. And the other is vaccine coverage. At the moment, only sort of children have not been vaccinated, and whether teenagers and children, we are able to sort of get universal vaccination and vaccines are safe and effective in all these different age groups, that also has to be seen. But I think that there are sort of signs that things are opening up, but I do think it will take a year or more for things to get completely sort of back to what, I mean, I'm not sure whether we will be able to get back to how things were before the pandemic. People will sort of have much more awareness now of how viruses spread and so on. and but it will be, and then people have a lot more awareness of how effective remote working can be, and remote collaborations can be, and it's much better for the planet. So I don't think it will be business as usual, but I think things will probably sort of get to some semblance of normality in the next year or so.
When do you think the world, or our corner of the world, will open back up to normalcy post-COVID?
Well, we, Emily and I have kept up with this stuff in quite a lot of detail. She's done some research on the topic, has been a little bit involved in. So I don't know if I have I have a more informed decision, a more informed perspective than some. But of course, this is a combination of science and reality, as we're seeing, right? So to start digressing even more, I got my second dose of the Moderna vaccine maybe 3 weeks ago, and I've been struggling with the mental model of transitioning from where we've been, which we've been extremely careful, to something a little different. And so the recent announcement of no need for masks when you're fully vaccinated, and I'm struggling with that even being a reality. So there is a lot to this question. It's like multifaceted because there's political and there's scientific and there's emotional pieces coming together, the intersectionality of that. In terms of normalcy, some of this has to do also with when are kids going to have access to vaccinations and when those are going to be widespread. And part of it is going to depend on whether there's variants and whether COVID becomes more like the flu or it becomes more like smallpox. My sense right now is, since this is falsifiable when you're asking me to pin something down, my sense of this is that vaccinations for kids, maybe after 5 or something like that, maybe a little younger, will start in the fall, early fall. And so if you work backwards from that and you think about even younger kids, we're probably talking winter of 2022 for people to start, in the US at least, to be more broadly vaccinated. And then since there are such huge chunks of the world with lack of vaccinations or big spreads, we talked about Brazil, India is in a terrible, terrible place, which saddens me. We should fully expect some variants to evolve from that, kind of take a rational step to this. And so we've been talking about boosters and processes. So I think COVID is going to be on our minds. And I don't mean like the flu, where it's maybe on your minds that you try to remember how it's flu shot, but I mean like actively on our minds, at least through 2022. And then after that, that's where we get to the fundamental question of what will go forward. So I don't know, that's my prediction on this. It's kind of saddens me. But on the other hand, you can go indoors without a mask now if you have a vaccine. So maybe now is the time where everything's normal.
Yeah, I guess I didn't precisely define normal, and I purposely left it for
yeah. So I got to monologue professorially for all this time. On a more personal note, about 2 weeks ago, I think, I broke the strings in my tennis racket, and I went to a store, which I haven't been doing at all, to get it restrung, and it's in this mall near here. And there was all these people in a cafe outside having drinks and hanging out, and it was like 10 a.m. And I felt such a strong sense of nostalgia. I love going to coffee shops and like working or spending time and being around that bustling kind of this peace, and that was such a big part of my life. And when I saw that, it felt still far away for me, but it felt like something that I really miss. Yeah, I hope we can get to a better place sooner than I'm suggesting.
So let's try to make a falsifiable prediction. When do you think our part of the world will open back up post-COVID? And I realize that you have a lot of like privileged information because you are actively planning for that world.
I think it will. It's any minute now. What has really surprised me about where we happen to be at this point, there's a timestamp saying when this all was done. I don't know, but is how quickly we pivoted back to everything's normalish. You know, you asked me this question 3 months ago, I would have said, well, I don't know, 6 months and it'll be slow and whatever. Now, it turns out it was a little bit faster. It appears to be moving a little bit faster, but more importantly, it's happening very quickly. Although, so, you know, we talk about, you talk about what your personal experiences are and kind of empathy. It's clear to me that different people, and we just stick with the US, different people are having very different experiences of the world right now and what the pandemic is. There are people who never stopped going to work every day. There are people who've been living in Zoom and Blue Jeans and everything else, and Cisco and whatever else, and Microsoft Teams and whatever platforms there are out there, so that I don't show any bias. You know, their experiences are radically different. So when you talk about our part of the world, right, you're actually talking about, even inside that part of the world, at least 4 or 5 different ones. And their experiences are all very different from one another. I think for a lot, there has been no change. It's been open the whole time. There's just been fewer other people around. And then for some, it's felt radically different. I've been coming to work 2 days a week on average, going back to the middle of last summer. And I've watched people come and go, and I've seen sort of how it's changed. The campus, by the way, looks radically different from the way it looked a year ago. There's like new building. Construction workers never stop constructing. Like things are happening. The trees have been, I mean, it's just a very different kind of place. So I think we are going, for the people for whom things have felt closed, which isn't everyone, perhaps not even the majority of people, even in our world, that I think will happen slowly and with a lot of agency by those people. For everybody else, I think it's going to open up right away. And by the time fall comes around, it'll be kind of the way it's always been for a whole set of those people. And then there'll be a subset of people for whom it will not be true for months and months and months and months and months. And, you know, if there's nothing else that being in this job for the last year or so has told me or taught me, is that you really do have to treat each of those groups. You have to appreciate what each of those groups are differently going through. But at a high level bit, I think fall semester will look like almost every other fall semester. The students will be on campus. That will force a whole set of other issues and will more or less be back to normal. Now, here's another question you might have asked me is, are we ever going back to normal, or how are things going to look different, particularly in higher ed and for the way research is done? I think the answer is a lot more normal than we currently think. But there will be a few key decisions that we as a community are going to have to make. Like, do we really want to go back to conferences the way they used to be? I mean, you know, we're able to do some really cool things we weren't able to do before because things were remote, and you could do things like record a 45-minute movie and say it's your talk that involves 15 other people, right? There are things that you could do that just weren't possible before. By the way, it's a lot of work, so I'm not sure most people want to do it. And most people don't have a communications department to help them with it. And a friend they've been doing things like this with together for, you know, almost 10 years, and, you know, with whom they have a good they have a good writing relationship and all that. I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, I don't know if we want to go back or if we really do want to go back. I just don't know. I mean, I miss traveling. I miss seeing people. I miss conferences, even though I don't go to them as often as I used to. And there's something important about being in the same physical space. On the other hand, you can have literally an order of magnitude more people involved. So we're gonna have to figure out some way to do both of those things. What I worry about, actually, and by the way, I could take what I just said about conferences and we could talk about teaching on campus. We could talk about, you know, pick whatever part of life you want to pick. There's a similar kind of trade-off there. Including, by the way, how do you do things like remote support for people who it turns out can't come on campus to deal with mental health issues, for example, or medical issues, or to be advised. Are we going to have to provide more mechanisms for reaching out to them, all of which cost money, all of which costs time, and all of which requires training and changing the way that we do things. And I think that I don't know where that's going to end up, but I do know that it's a whole series of decisions that we're collectively going to have to make. And I don't know what the outcome is, but I do know that it will perforce be different from what we were doing. And what I worry about is that it will be differently different, so that we will construct a world such that the elite will still go to conferences and the rest won't. And that's where the networking will happen. And that's rich get richer positive feedback loop. And that would be incredibly easy to construct. In fact, that would be the default. The default would be to, in the name of expanding access, would be to create multiple tiers. And once you're in the right group, positive feedback works. And while you're outside that group, you don't have access. You don't even realize you don't have. In fact, what's bad about these kinds of things is the people on the outside don't even realize what it is they're missing. And the people on the inside don't realize what they have. And so you create these kind of false worlds of expectations that kind of perpetuate these differences and these inequities. So I think that's actually the biggest concern we should all have, and the biggest risk that we're taking is not that we won't figure out how to use technology. It's that we will figure out how to use technology, and we will actually make things worse in a way that won't be visible to people.
Yeah. And the pernicious thing about setting up a world like that, as you correctly pointed out, is you don't even realize what you don't have access to, because it's not that 10% of the time you get to attend it. It's just you are always being slotted into a tier that just doesn't have ever access to those sorts of things. So
yeah, I worry about that, but I think on balance it'll be good, but it will not be as good as it could be unless we're very intentional about it. And replace that with restaurants, replace that with working at home, replace that with conferences, replace that with teaching. Pick whatever. There's some trade-off like that in every sector and aspect of our lives. We're just not. And it's going to be really hard to think about it because it's so much, it's so complicated. There's so many people involved. But hopefully we'll at least try to do the right thing.
Yeah. When do you think our corner of the world will open up post-COVID back to what may be a new normal?
I thought in the fall, no. At least the plan is, assuming the new variants don't come out too aggressively and vaccine cannot catch up, but.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm polling everybody, trying to see what their predictions are. We'll see when the time comes.
Fall.
Oh.